Hello and welcome to Dish Shelved with Adam White. This is the last installment of Comictober. I'm going to talk about Wilson by Daniel Clowes. Now, before I get started, I know that I promised at the beginning when I talked about Palomar that I was going to, at the end of the month, talk about the Locust stories by Jaime Hernandez that were from Love and Rockets. Now, apparently, somewhere during the month, I got confused between the number 4 and the number 5 as to how many weeks there were in the month. And I set too many books because I kept finding stuff I wanted to talk about. So, apologies to anyone who was looking forward to that. Uh, I will do it at some point in the future, probably before too long, before the end of the year, probably. But I just kept finding comics I wanted to talk about because a lot of these independent comics don't get a lot of conversation, and I wanted to get that out there. Now, I do also realize that doing these comics, uh, all the extra viewers I'd gained last month, I've been bleeding off during this month with talking about comics. So, um, sorry to all those viewers who felt let down by me doing comic reviews, but hopefully some people will give them a chance. And also, I'm going to do more comics in the future, more independent ones, because, like I said, I kept finding stuff I wanted to do, but I won't drag it out. I've got a couple other things different coming up next month, and but I will be doing more comics in the future. I found that I like doing it, and I like getting the word out there about these comics that don't always get a lot of stuff talked about them and stuff. Anyway, back to Wilson by Daniel Clowes. This book is hysterical. Uh, Again, it's a book for you know. The only thing it really has in it is some coarse language and a lot of it. But so I mean, teens could get a kick out of it, and I just wouldn't give it to any young readers or anything. But adults get it. I think have a different perspective on Wilson, and I think can really get a lot out of this book. Wilson is a person who doesn't have much of a life, and doesn't he doesn't have virtually anything going on, and he has no filter. He pretty much just says what he wants to anybody, and to heck with the reaction that he gets. And he has a lot of funny stuff in here. Most of it I can't read on this channel because I try to keep it PG. But he has a lot of funny stuff, and it's set up it's a graphic novel and was originally done as a graphic novel, so it isn't a collection, uh, but it's set up in little parts, and he even does some in like a blue tone, almost as a black and white, but it's got more of a blue tone, and then sometimes he does it more cartoony than others. Um, if I can find it. Yeah, there we go. So, like, you'll see on one side over here, he does it a little more cartoony. And then on the other side, he does it in a more realistic style. And he does that a lot throughout this book. It changes back and forth. And it really works. It just kind of shows you the cartoonish nature of life and how some things make you feel a certain way and look a certain way, and then other times you feel a different way. And so the look in here kind of plays along with what he's doing in that scene. And I thought it was a really effective way of doing it. And but the story is basically, I mean, what it is about a guy in his 40s uh, who used to have a wife, and he may or may not have a daughter that was given up for adoption, and he goes on a search to find her, and then just a group of bad things happen, and he just ends up maybe better off than he was, but maybe not. But that's the basic gist of the story. But the whole thing is the humor in it is just fantastic. Daniel Clowes has done a lot of stuff, and a matter of fact, I'll probably talk about some of his other stuff in the future. He did a comic called Eight Ball that started in, I think, 1989, and it had things like Ghost World. You may have heard they did a movie of that, and which was really good, and the comic was really good too. And he just had it just told different stories in his Eight Ball comic. There was one issue that was an oversized issue called Death Ray, where he did his version of a superhero, and it was just hysterical. So I may bring that out at some point too. But so he's been doing comics for a long time, but this I think was around 2010 for Wilson. Uh, so it's not that old. He's hasn't done a whole lot since then. Just one or two graphic novels, I think. And that's something I've got all his lined up, so I may talk about another one of his in the future, or I may do a couple at once or something. But Wilson is just hysterical. I mean, it's really funny. And it's just the way that he deals with life situations and the things that he says about it uh, are just outstanding. And like I said, most of them I can't read on here. So, but just take my word for it. It's very funny. Uh, and again, you'll get a lot more of that out of it as an adult than you would necessarily as a kid. The kids will find it funny just for the situations, but the adult reader will get, which I've tried to gear this month towards, will get a lot more out of it because you've seen a little bit more and been around for a while and kind of get the gist of how he's feeling. And the way that he deals with situations or the way that you wish you could deal with it sometimes. And he says what you wish you could say to people and get away with it. But it's really, really funny. Now, they also made a movie of this, which I was not aware of until a few weeks ago. And it was done about 2017. And it stars Woody Harrelson as Wilson. And I just watched it, and I thought and the screenplay was actually done by Dan Clowes, and he was a producer on it too. So he had a lot to do with the film. It stays generally with the plot of the comic, but I mean they have to do certain different things just for a movie because it's a movie and it plays a little differently. But it's basically the same story, and Woody Harrelson is hysterical as Wilson. And I would highly recommend the movie too. And like I said, Dan Clowes wrote it too, so uh, it's faithful to the comic. But it plays along with the comic, and he says a lot of the things that he says in here. Some of it's verbatim from the comic, and it's just a really funny movie. So I would highly recommend it as well. But Wilson, outstanding comic. I'll see if I can find. Yeah, here's another. See, he does kind of like the one color tone, black and white, on one side, and then he'll do more realistic on the other side. He has a dog, Pepper, and he's always confused about how people can be so nice to dogs when they walk up but completely ignore you. And I know how that is too. I've got my dog, and I used to have two dogs that were pretty cute, and my one I've got now is pretty cute too. So I can understand why you'd have more affection for the dogs than the person, but he of course deals with it in his typical Wilson way. But that's pretty much the gist of this book. I highly recommend it. It doesn't take a great long time to read. It's it's not a super thick graphic novel, but it's well worth your time. It should still be available in paperback and maybe even hardback too, which is what this is. But I got it not too long, I think, after it came out, but um, it should still be in print. It's drawn in quarterly, does it. And he also is coming out with, he did a 2-book slipcase version of his 8 ball comic, which I've got. And I got it when it came out, and it's really good too. And it's coming out in paperback pretty soon, like within the next month or so. Or it may even be out by the time this goes on the air. But I'd highly recommend it too. But I'll probably talk about it in the future, so you can wait and see if you something you think you'd like or not. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with me this week. I think you'll really enjoy Wilson if you give it a try, and I will see you guys next week.